Hello, everyone. Welcome to Faith and Fellowship. We're three guys based in Utah. I'm Kirk.
I'm Joel.
And I'm Lyric.
And the goal of our show is to share stories and beliefs from different people local to our area.
Our mission is to bring civil discourse and allow people who hold different faiths a platform to tell us what they believe.
The show's model consists of an interview episode and a follow-up response episode where we'll discuss the topics that were brought up with our guests in the initial interview and give our take from a biblical standpoint.
Full disclaimer, not all comments and opinions expressed by our guests represent our own opinions. Thank you guys for listening and enjoy this episode.
Thank you for joining Faith and Fellowship Podcast. Before this episode starts, we want to let you know that the content is very sensitive and heavy. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to Faith and Fellowship. We are so happy to be on today. Before we go any further, we are very excited to have our first recurring guest that we have ever had on the podcast before. First recurring guest, and big announcement, this is our season 4 opening episode. Season 4, Faith and Fellowship. We're happy to be here. We've been going for 3 seasons, and first recurring guest that we have ever had here on the podcast. But before we get to our guest in studio with me here, I have Pastor Kirk.
It's good to be here.
And
season 4. So we had
Lyric.
3 seasons.
3 seasons.
That's crazy.
Dude, it's exciting. And Lyric, the goldfish man.
I just ate an entire ocean's worth of goldfish.
An entire ocean's worth of goldfish. But without further ado, we have our reoccurring guest. He is here with us virtually today, but we are so very glad to have him back. We have David Arthur here with us in spirit, in studio. David, we're glad to have you on.
Awesome. I'm telling you, it's great to be back on. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling like I might not be a recurring guest because that dude you had on your show before, man, he has some issues and he has some stuff wrong.
Man,
Which one?
a whole lot
has
happened since we had you on last, and we're excited to hear kind of some of the things that have happened since we had you on last. Have you talk a little bit more about your ministry,
And you're coming from, can you remind us where you're coming to us from? Where are you located?
Maine.
Okay.
Maine, way up in the Northeast, that dark little place with the wicked state government.
How's the weather there right now?
Actually, it was sunny most of the day, but started off with rain, and then I went to let the dog out, and it was like a blizzard out there. It was snowing, and
wow.
Now it's just everything's covered in ice. So it's been cold, but we've been blessed because we could have had a really bad winter, and we really didn't. So we've just been blessed.
Yeah. For our listeners, if you have not listened to the 2 podcasts that we did with David and him sharing his story, go back to season 1. I think it was probably 5 or the 5th or 6th episode that we've done. You'll find his name. But David basically told us his story and about how he had transitioned to be a girl or a woman, and then told us the story about how he came to Christ and detransitioned and back to a man. And although we've talked about some of this off the air, and we may very well get into your story some as we're talking about things, but it's amazing. And just to remind everybody, David and I, we've met each other on formerly Twitter, now X. I was able to through algorithms or whatever, you came up in my feed, and your story was just so intriguing, and I just messaged you on X or Twitter, and you were gracious to want to come on, and we've been following since that first time on our podcast your emails that you've been bringing or been sending out, and just kind of thinking through, your ministry and some summaries and updates and things like that. But why don't we start there, David? I know there's a lot that we can talk about, but why don't we start there? Is like, what is your organization / ministry like? What is it that you are trying to accomplish, and the name of it, and the ministry and organization you're part of?
Well, ever since the beginning, it's been IBelong, Amen Ministries, mostly because, that seems to be the biggest thing right now is everybody wants to belong, especially children. And they want to belong to something. I didn't have a father in my life. He took his life before I was born. And I was physically and sexually abused from a very early age. So I was seeking male affirmation for so many years. And I just wanted to belong. And even when I finally belonged, right, and walked for about 11 years in God's good grace, I actually left the fold for a couple years. And it was during that time that we connected. And he reeled me back in. And I have to say that because I wanted to belong so bad that when I actually belonged, it scared the nonsense out of me, and I ran from it. And I told God I was going to be a gay Christian, and he let me go, and he let me see that it was impossible. Basically, he let me see it was impossible. He let me see that every single road that I would take in that journey, that it would be perversion, and that it would be outside of him. It would be nothing of him and nothing good. And that's what it was. And so as he reeled me back in, my ministry has always been to reach out, give testimony, and basically tell other people about themselves by telling them about me. Because if I had a room of 50 men and women who were trapped in this rainbow movement, you would be astonished to find that probably all, if not 49 out of the 50, had the same exact story, had the same exact issues, the same abuse, the same trauma, the same home lives, and so many of the same things that fall into place. That's what I kind of I build upon when I go out and I speak to people, and I like to just tell them all about me, and I'm telling them all about them, and it just draws them in, and it kind of takes away breaks down that wall that they have around them, especially when dealing with somebody who calls themselves a Christian, dealing with the church, because I know my own experiences with the church when I was a transgender prostitute, out there causing havoc, a criminal. I know my own experiences with the church weren't that great. It's we have this this little mantra that we go out in the street and we say, God loves you, now smile, he has a plan for your life. And I don't do that because, that's the truth is God does love every single one of us. However, his love doesn't get us into the kingdom of heaven. His grace does that. His mercy does that. We don't have to attain his love. We have to attain his grace, his mercy. And when I talk to people about that, they're like, no one's ever told me that, and so that's pretty much, that's just where I'm at. That's all I want to do is just talk to people and reel them in. Just be the example, introduce them to the Christ through word, through deed, through action. I don't have to go out in the street and stand up on a milk crate and get a bullhorn and a Bible and start quoting scripture from a book that they don't understand. And that same scripture tells me that they don't understand it, right? It says that the natural man receives not things of the spirit. So why would I try to feed the natural man spiritually? So I just go, and I just go and just have regular conversations with them. I mean, I've connected with so many people on so many different levels that sometimes I sit back and I'm astonished. I'm astonished at the paths that God can cross, right? And because it's none of David, it's none of me. I'm not special. It's all him. He crosses paths. Even when I walked away from him and I was outside the fold, he still used me. And he still turned things around for his good. You know, I mean, there were guys that identified as homosexual that I was in contact with that I was telling them that it was okay to be gay and to be a Christian. And I ended up talking to one on the phone one day and I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm reading the Bible and I can't find none of the stuff you told me is in there. And I was like, "Oh, you know," and it was all a bunch of little breadcrumbs that kind of just led me back to the path that I was supposed to be on. Anyway, he reeled me back in. You know, I went through some stuff during the process, and now really it's just all about just reaching out and giving everybody hope, letting them know that there is hope. It doesn't matter what you've done, right? I mean, if I walked around worrying about what I've done and allowed people to use my past to try to beat me up, I wouldn't get anything done. I would be forever defending myself and walking around moping and feeling like, you know, I was unworthy. Well, sorry, I'm not one of the ones that run around talking about I'm so unworthy. I'm a dirty, filthy old rag. Nope, that's not me. He deemed me he deemed me worthy. He washed me clean. So I am worthy and I am clean. And he said so. And I'm not going to argue with him, right? So, and that's what I want people to understand, you know. And so aside from that aspect of ministry, I also am now embarking on something that I started to embark on many years ago, and I kind of let it go. And it's kind of like a Homosexuals Anonymous, because what a lot of us don't understand is that homosexuality is a sexual addiction. It's not an orientation. You know, I went through about 1,000 emails that I had collected over the 11 years that I was traveling all over, giving testimony and kind of fire and brimstoning everybody. And I noticed in a lot of those emails, people that have ministries were saying, "Well, David, you know, there's homosexual sin and there's heterosexual sin and there's that." And I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. All sin is heterosexual sin, because heterosexuality is the absolute only sexuality of a design. That is our design. That is God's good creation. He didn't call it heterosexuality because he didn't have to. He created one man, one woman. That was that, you know, and I see, because I know a lot of other addictions as well. And so I can easily see homosexuality as a sexual addiction. And because I can do that, I think that I need to help others understand that it is a sexual addiction, whether it's accepted by the world or not, right? Whether the world is calling it an orientation or a design or telling people that they're born that way. We are all born that way. Whatever that is for each one of us, we're born into sin, we're shaped in iniquity, and iniquity at its root means perversion. So that's it.
That makes me think of, so we've been going through a study at the Scholl's house that really has just been talking about sexuality. And I think this could be important to talk about. Is one of the lessons, the guy was talking about what he was talking about homosexuality. He was talking about being gay. And he said the answer to homosexuality, the opposite of homosexuality, is not heterosexuality. He said,
that's right.
The opposite of of stealing, right, isn't not stealing. The answer to stealing isn't don't steal. He said the answer to homosexuality is holiness. The opposite of any sin is not doing that sin. It is holiness. And when we try and achieve, conquering our sins with just trying harder not to, we're not going to get anywhere. Nothing happens, because in and of ourselves, we are sinful creatures. We are born with, like you said, whatever that addiction may be, we're born with sin. And there's nothing we can do about that in and of ourselves. But because of what Jesus has done for us, we have the option to be sanctified, and if we turn to Jesus, holiness is the answer.
Yeah, David,
I totally agree with that.
Did you have something else did you wanted to add to that? Or
yeah, I mean, that it's funny because I said that and wrote it in my book like 10 years ago, that the opposite of homosexuality is not heterosexuality. The opposite of homosexuality is redeemed, right?
Yeah.
It's holiness. It's justification. And that's the truth. And so for me, it was accepting, one, that homosexuality is in what we see in our little boxed world as an addiction, but also that addiction isn't a disease. That addiction is just sin, right? It's just the fallen nature. So it's not a disease. As we call it a disease, then it kind of gives us a reason to stumble, to fall, to run back to it. Mm-hmm. I'm having a rough time right now. I'm going back. And so, it's kind of like all on the same line, but only Jesus the Christ was the only one who, being revealed to me, could show me the way, right? I could only follow the guidance and the lead of the Holy Ghost, and not of man or of programs or, all of this stuff, but just of him. And I believe that even with me running back and falling out of the fold for a couple years, that was all part of the plan. In that 2.5 years, I learned so much more about the rainbow movement than I knew, even after over 30 years of being an advocate and a member of it. So I learned so much more in 2.5 years on that journey of wherever I was trying to get to.
Right. So when you say you just mentioned a homosexual anonymous, can you flesh that out a little bit more? Explain, I
didn't hear what you said.
Oh, when you were saying that you had a homosexual anonymous, does that mean you're having
Yes.
a ministry where, like Alcohol Anonymous, that people are coming and you're leading and trying to talk through those things, or what does that mean?
It's kind of on that it's kind of on that model, right? It's not AA or NA because I don't think that I think there's a good psychology there, but not great morality there. And I don't believe in that whole model, but it's kind of just the absolute way that he led me out and the different stepping stones that he provided me. I believe I need to try to provide those things, through word, through deed, through action, but provide them for somebody else. And at the same time, I think one of the biggest parts of this is going to be to empower them, to empower others. I could go to any church in the state that I live in, and I could tell them all about the rainbow movement. But what they can't do is tell me about the rainbow movement. And so I need to empower them.
That's good.
Right. So I need to empower other people to know and pretty much to help them build up their arsenal. It's kind of what I'm doing like right now on my own. I'm going state by state, just down an alphabetical list and emailing all the senators, all the representatives, all the delegates, just emailing them my testimony, and telling them the depths and the dangers of this cult. And yeah, I'm going to call it a cult. And I can do that because I lived over 30 years of it. I'm a victim of that cult, so I can call it a cult. And being a victim of it, I know it in ways that many other people don't. Even people that identify with it right now, they have no idea what they're identifying with, what they're becoming a part of, what they are embracing, what they're running into. They have no idea.
Yeah.
And they're not going to until they're saturated in it, and then they'll suffer.
Do you have something?
Yeah, no, I just had a question. I didn't want to interrupt you if you had something I thought you wanted to finish. I have a question. It may be a little bit of a longer answer if we can, if it's a question that could be answered in a timely manner. But is that all right if I propose the question?
Absolutely.
So I'm only 22, and it seems like just in the last, I don't even know, at least that I've observed, 5 to 6 years, it seems like I remember as a kid and even, through middle school, you would never see any kind of LGBTQ stuff in, at least that I didn't as a kid, in the media or on TV or like anything like that. It seems like in the last 6 years, maybe even 5, it's like went from I never really realized it or I never saw it and it didn't feel like it was in front of me constantly to now it is like you can't go anywhere without sexuality being put right in front of your face. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so is there some kind of landmark event that has happened, or how has it been from, throughout my 22 years of life, 6-7 years ago, I don't remember seeing anything, or it was very far in between, to now it's like you cannot do anything, internet, media, TV, news, without seeing the LGBT movement right there in front of you. And what? Yeah, I mean, it seems like a full takeover of just here's this, full takeover of we're going to put this in front of you.
And
constantly.
not even offering it to us, but just shoving it down our throats. It's not like, oh, this is here if you're curious. It's like, no, this is what you need to engage in and believe.
And so there's a lot right there that to unwrap, right? So it wasn't like that when I was a kid, right? I mean, how did I, as a little kid, start identifying as trans? And identify as gay and then trans. Well, it's because, like with anything, right? We know that they're spirits, and they don't come alone. I can tell you that homosexuality never comes alone. It is a legion. It is a lot, and it's a lot of different oppressions and a lot of different things to deal with. But over the years of doing research on the movement that I was a part of for over 30 years, and I was trans for over 20 years, I learned that oh man, it just went right out of my head. It's the LGBTQIA scholastic something. It's like GLA, gay, lesbian, straight students, something like that. But they've been a part of the curriculum in schools since the 1980s. That was, and so everything is piece by piece by piece. There's something that they say it's satire, but I'm not so sure about it. But if you look up the Homosexual Manifesto, you can Google it. It starts off with like, we will sodomize your sons. And it goes down a list of things that have actually taken place, not just on a physical level, but on spiritual levels as well. And I say that we should all be petrified right now because this world has never seen a mass of wickedness this deadly. So we have watched this explode, right? We've watched it go from John and Joe down the road with a white picket fence. They don't bother no one. Why is everybody always picking on them? To now send your kids down to John and Joe, or you're a hater. And anyone that has their children in public school, and I mean, it's kind of like sorry, not sorry, but I don't believe that you can truly want the best for your children and send them to the government school system when you know what's happening in the government school system. There's enough videos out there, and there's no more excuses that it's not happening in my little town, because it's happening everywhere. This curriculum, this targeting, this desensitization, this sexualization, it's not just books, it's materials, it's videos. We have third graders learning about oral sex, anal sex. We have kindergartners and preschoolers putting on bracelets for whoever or whatever they want to be that day. We have schools with litter boxes in their classrooms for children who identify as furries. Why would anyone want a child to identify as furry when furries started out as a very sadistic sexual fetish that entailed pedophilia, bestiality, and that depraved list goes on? So why would anyone want a child to identify as furry when anyone with any experience in the world knows where furries came from?
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot that I think we can unpack with that, and I know it's going to carry on to our next episode. But one of the things that I think is telling in all of this is when you remove the principle of God's plan in marriage, where do you stop? And so it was, well, no, it's not one man and one woman. It can be a man, or it can be a woman and a woman. And then you have to ask the question, then you almost have undercut your foundation to say, well, what about, for example, and this would be something we kind of deal with here in our context, but like polygamy. And so is it one man, and can it be 4 wives? Then what makes it say that your interpretation of what sexuality can be is different than what mine is when you eliminate the standard for truth, I guess is what I'm saying. And so what you're trying to say, it seems like, is what has happened is it's just continued. Once it got started eroding, it just continued to erode until now we're in this, what you were just explaining through, like the fairies and bestiality and all of those things that are going on.
Right. And so you also have pornography, which has just enveloped the entire world, right? So pornography has put a lot of men and women, because it's not just a man's thing anymore. It's just as many women out there. So pornography has put us in a place of immorality, right? Even righteous people have walked away from their right relationship with God into pornography. And so, and Judith Reisman, I don't know if you know who she was. She was the Reisman Institute. She passed away years back, but she had a lifelong job of just exposing Alfred Kinsey for the mad scientist pedophile that he was, and the system in general, and how it was falling apart, and how it was depraved, and how everything was becoming sexualized. She said to me, she said, David, men who are trapped in immorality, especially pornography, they find it really hard to stand up against immorality. So even when they know that this rainbow movement is wrong and doesn't belong in the schools, they know that bearded men with ball gowns and makeup on don't belong gyrating in front of kids in a library, they're not going to stand up against that immorality because they are enveloped in their own immorality. And it's also giving us a lot of reasons to feed, right, all of our deviant natures. It's giving us an excuse to do anything we want with whoever we wish, whenever we want. And I mean, we have men. It keeps popping in my head, and so I want to speak on it because I believe it may answer your question a little more in depth. But we are where we are at because of depraved, wicked, perverted men. And I say that with surety. I was a transgender prostitute. A lot of my clientele were lawyers, judges, politicians, police chiefs, fire chiefs, men with lots of money, powerful men. And these men had fetishes of their own. I've had judges and lawyers come to me, politicians, actors, and under their three-piece suit, they had on women's garments. And these are men that fall in another category, but under the same umbrella of the transgender umbrella. And they fall in a category of autogynephiles, cross-dressers, transvestites, right? So transvestism, they're all fetishes. So these men are sexually aroused by either or, one of two things, either the thought of themselves as women or the just wearing women's clothing. So these are the ones that are demanding access to women's bathrooms and women's spas and women's prisons. Because believe it or not, we have men in almost every woman's prison in our country alone. And women are being attacked, raped, impregnated in prison where they're supposed to be safe. And these men that are gaining access to women's spaces, these are the autogynephiles, the transvestites, the fetishists, the ones who are sexually aroused by these things. And so they're falling under this transgender umbrella because they fall into a category that's under that perversion. Mm. And so these are the men that are passing laws, making laws, lobbying for the laws, presenting bills, voting on bills. These are the men who are doing it. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken at different state houses across the country, and I actually asked the whole entire panel, how many of the men in here are women wearing women's garments under their clothes? Because I'm thinking it's a lot of you, because a lot of you are voting on this bill. You know, and so things like that, and I'm always presenting them with things like that because I want them to really think. Mm-hmm. And if they are, I want them to make sure they don't vote for the bill, you know, just out of the fact that I don't want no one to think I'm like that. Right. Because we have to start making men stand up. We have to force them to stand up and step up and stand up against this darkness that's trying to envelop not just the world, but the children. I mean, the children have always been the focus, right? Ever since the beginning, they were sacrificing them to Moloch. We're talking about if the enemy doesn't get them in the womb, guess what? He's going to get them in the government public school system. These are just the facts, and this is what's happening. I don't have children, and most of the time I'm pretty grateful for that, because I don't know how I would deal in this world today.
Well, and I would like to, I have my own opinions on that, and the fact that I do have 5 kids. And I think what we want to do, David, I think it's a great time to wind this episode down. And if you are willing to stay with us, we would like to do another episode where we pick up on what you just said about how do we fight? How do we combat? What can we do as believers, right? As people who have been redeemed by God's grace, realize that sin is the essence of our problem with God, and we've been redeemed back to God by His grace, by His mercy. We are the church, but we are called to live in a way in this culture to reflect not only God's patterns and holiness, but His love and His mercy and His grace. So what I would like to do is I would love to because we're right up against the clock on this episode. Let's come back, if you're willing to come back for another episode. Let's talk about some of those things. I've got some articles I'd like to read regarding our state legislation and things that are going on in our state, and I'd love to get your take on those. So would you be willing to come back and do one more episode with us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome.
So let's wind this down, and we'll come back and do it again.
Yeah, this is exciting stuff. Just hearing, hearing where you're at, hearing even how far you've come since we had you on, 5 months ago? 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you are listening to this episode right now and you have not heard our first couple episodes with him, you're missing out on a lot. So go back, listen to it. But we're thrilled to have you back. We're excited to have another episode with you here in just a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this. And again, I will say, make sure you go back, because we are intentionally not going back and looking at all the things that David talked about in those first couple episodes about his life and his transition, detransition. We're trying to continue the conversation, and David has a voice in this and has a lot to say. And like he said, he's being able to talk to us and educate us. And it's all about wanting to glorify God and to love people where they are, tell them about the glorious grace of Jesus Christ. And so if you're hearing this and you want to know more about what's going on, you can reach us at Artcity.church. We would love to, if you're in the vicinity here, or you can email us at the email address that'll be in the description, and to keep a conversation going if you have questions regarding that. And David,
if you're interested in getting in touch with David and things, I'll put his website in the description below. We have it in our last episodes as well, but I'll put it in this one so that you can check him out.
Absolutely. So until then, we're gonna be back. Hope you'll catch the next podcast also. But thanks for being with us at this podcast, and we will see you next time on Faith and Fellowship.